Welcome to another EJ the Realm Reviewer video. Today we're going to talk about a really amazing book. This is my second channel. My first channel is EJ the Collector, and that's a channel about comic books. And on this channel, I'm talking about the different novels that I read, because I read a lot, and I read a lot of comics as well as novels, and that's why I created this channel, so I can have an outlet to talk about my novels as well. And I didn't really think that they belonged on my other channel. Anyway, we're talking about Eisenhorn today. I'm super excited to talk about this book. I thought it was great, and I want to get into what I liked about it. I'm going to give a overview without doing any spoilers for about the first half of this video. I'll let you know when the spoilers are coming, because I am going to talk about some spoilers near the end of this. But if you just want to hear what I think about this book and you don't want to hear any spoilers, and that way you can watch this video and then you can go and read it yourself, you're safe. I'll tell you before any spoilers come, and they'll be at the back half of the video. So getting into this, I just want to first start off by talking about Dan Abnett. Now, I really like Dan Abnett as a writer, and this is talking as a comic book reader and as a novel reader. So I've read Dan Abnett's work in both comic and novel form. I've read Horus Rising, which is the first book of the Horus Heresy within Warhammer 40K, and I've also read his Guardians of the Galaxy run, which was great. He's the writer who brought together the team of, Rocket Raccoon, Gamora, Drax, Star-Lord, all those guys. So from both perspectives, he's just a great writer and very versatile and can tell all kinds of different stories. And I think that, if you're going to get into the world of Warhammer 40K, you can't go wrong with starting off with a Dan Abnett book. And this would be a great one to start with, by the way. We've set up the fact that I really love Dan Abnett, and this made me love him even more for his writing. Let's also talk about the setting, right? This is Warhammer 40K. It's the grim, dark future. So if you don't know anything about Warhammer 40K, here's the shortest synopsis ever. It's in the year 40,000. The humans have spread out across the galaxy. They worship the God Emperor religiously, okay? And the God Emperor is an immortal being that is, mortally wounded during the Horus Heresy and then basically confined to his throne, his golden throne, which keeps him barely alive, but keeps his psychic energy going. And he is like a beacon to the travelers of the warp, which is how the humans get around from planet to planet without having to take thousands of light years. They go through something called the warp, which is where the chaos gods are from. They're evil gods that are trying to do all the bad things. And the God Emperor is, like I said, worshipped religiously, and he sits his golden throne in a half alive state, and he has basically set humans on a path to exterminate all aliens in the universe. Anyway, if you want to know more about Warhammer 40K, there's other much better videos that you can watch that'll dive further into the setting. This isn't the video for that. I just wanted to give a quick, short, condensed version of what it is. Another thing to note about Warhammer 40K is that there are Inquisitors. Now, Inquisitors have unilateral power over basically everything. They're there to make sure that there's no heretics, that there's no colluding with Xenos, which is what they call aliens. The first book is called Xenos. There's three major orders. It's Malleus, which is, to fight against demons, Xenos, which is of course against any kind of alien life, and then Hereticus, which is just anyone who's a heretic, goes against their religion of worshiping the God Emperor and things like that. So each book is named after a different major order of Inquisitors, and the first one is Xenos. And like I said, they have ultimate power. There's no one who can overrule a Inquisitor. They do have Inquisitor lords who are kind of above the regular Inquisitors. They're the only ones who could really kind of control any other Inquisitor. But for the most part, they have, like I said, ultimate power, and they are there to root out any kind of heresy or heretics or Xenos or whatever, demons. Anyway, Eisenhorn is a Inquisitor, and he's an Inquisitor that's also a Psyker. Now, Psykers are people that have psychic abilities, and there's all kinds of different psychic abilities in the world of Warhammer 40K. We won't go into all of them, but it's kind of like the Force for Eisenhorn in a way. He can kind of have psychic fights with people and stun them psychically and things like that. Also connect to people psychically, and it's interesting. It's actually something that I hope they develop more in further books. I'm really hoping that he gets more and more powerful. I think on the cover here you can see that he has a little bit of lightning glowing in that hand there. So I'm hoping that in future books we get to see him use some kind of lightning ability with his psyker powers. That would be pretty cool. Anyway, that's who Eisenhorn is, and he is the narrator of this book, and he's basically telling it from his perspective as if he's telling a story of his past. So he'll actually allude to things that happen in the future when he's like telling this story. That's the perspective you get. It's Eisenhorn telling this story of his past is like the main narrative you get in this book. And I think it's executed very well. And I do like how it probably foreshadows things that are coming in like future novels. So I'm interested to see where that goes. The story is very fast paced, which I mostly liked. You know, it does gloss over some things that you just have to know about Warhammer 40k lore. I will say this, you can go into this book having no knowledge of Warhammer 40k and I still think you'll enjoy it, but I would say it'd be good to watch a few videos on like the overall lore of Warhammer 40k and kind of get into the lore a little bit before you read this book. I think that would just give you the best reading experience possible. That's what I did personally before I jumped into the books. I think Arbiter Ian is a great channel on YouTube that you can go there and watch all kinds of very interesting lore videos about Warhammer 40k. But yeah, anyway, I just wanted to say that that's how I would start if you want to jump into this to the setting with this book. And then I'll say this as well. The overall idea of this book, like what is it? It's basically like a mystery detective novel, kind of, in a sense. But it kind of starts off with him kind of catching up to someone that he's been chasing for years and trying to uncover the plot that this character is involved in. And it picks up with that, and then the story carries forward where we're getting more and more clues as to what the overall goal of the villains in this book are trying to accomplish. And it's pretty satisfying. It has a few good twists. It has a couple parts that are a little bit cliche in this genre of book, which I'll get to in the spoilers section. But I'll talk about my overall feelings about it right now, and then we'll talk about the spoilers. So my overall in this book, I would give it like a 7.8 or 9 out of 10. I really liked it. I really enjoyed it. No, I'll give it an 8. I'll give it an 8 out of 10. Yeah, because I thought this was a great book. I thought it was fast paced. It didn't have a lot of parts where I was like, okay, I just got to get through this part of the book because, you know, I know like the more interesting parts are coming later and I just have to read through this part. Like there's some books that are like that. Like when I was reading the first book of Wheel of Time, there's the part where they're like kind of on the road, just going from like inn to inn, and it's like not interesting at all. And it's just explaining how they're like surviving, and it doesn't forward the plot at all. You don't run into that problem with this book. Like every part of it is either forwarding the plot or it's action or it's, you know, something interesting about the world of Warhammer 40k. It stays interesting all the way through. So it's a fast read and it's a good read. I will say this, like I already said, there were some cliche scenarios that happen in this book that like a lot of sci-fi or fantasy books, that those things happen. And they were okay, but it was kind of like, okay, it's one of these situations, you know, whatever. Also, I thought that Dan Abnett's storytelling, as I said at the beginning, was, you know, fantastic. And he's descriptive enough to be able to kind of imagine these crazy places that the book goes to in your mind, but not overly descriptive like someone like George R.R. Martin is, where he spends an hour describing, you know, 2 pages describing the snow or something. It's an exaggeration, but it's like, you know, it's these worlds are vibrant and interesting, and he puts the right amount of time in explaining and describing the world, but doesn't overdo it, which I always think is a hard balance to kind of have in a book, right? Because you want people to be able to vividly imagine the settings of the book, but you don't want to spend too much time, you know, describing it, like I already said. So yeah, that's why I give overall an 8.0. I really loved it. I highly recommend it. Now let's talk about some of the spoilers. Okay. Spoilers start here. And this is what I think about some of the different elements of the book that I didn't want to talk about at first because I didn't want to give anything important away. Let's start with the beginning. So at the beginning, he's chasing after iClone, who he's been chasing, you know, it tells you that he's been chasing this person for years. And it culminates in him catching up to iClone, who basically massacres a bunch of people that are in cryogenic tubes, right? Which is crazy. It starts you right off with like the grim dark, right? It throws you right in with like, you know, everything that happens in this universe isn't necessarily just. Even the Inquisitors, you know, they're working for the good of the Emperor, but like this is not a just society. You know, they can interrogate people in painful ways to get information. I just don't want to say the other word. But you know what I'm talking about. They can, you know, execute whoever they want on a whim if they wanted to. So don't read this thinking it's going to be like, you know, the hero comes and saves the day and everything's good and he has a great moral code and everything like that. No. In fact, he just shoots iClone right in the head, you know, at the first opportunity he gets, which I thought was awesome. You know, it was like, oh, okay, that's how this is. Just like, bam, like you're done. It's not, take him into custody or whatever. And that sets the tone certainly for the book. And like I said, just the fact that it starts off with, and it's described in a really, kind of gruesome way where these people are being unalived, coming out of these cryogenic tubes prematurely and not being able to recover. And yeah, again, it just sets the tone. The next thing I'll talk about is I thought the Saruthi, who are the Xenos or alien race that is colluding with the Glaws. So I'll step back a second. The Glaws, right? Glaw. Forgive me if I say any of these things wrong. The Glaws are like this rich family in the sector that are basically making a trade with the Xenos called the Saruthi for something called the Necrotouch. Necrotouch, I hope I'm saying that right, which is basically a book or a tome that allows you to unlock the secrets of like chaos. So you could become like potentially a really powerful psyker if you understood it, but also it's so powerful that like any normal mind can't necessarily withstand reading it. There's this like common theme in Warhammer 40k where there's like these symbols of chaos or even words of chaos, and just hearing them or reading them can drive a regular person mad and corrupt them. And so this book is a source of extreme chaos, and maybe could be used as a weapon by a very powerful psyker, or used for good, maybe used for bad, but probably used for bad because it's going to corrupt probably whoever reads it. Anyway, the Glaws are basically mining these artifacts for the Saruthi to obtain this book. And I thought the Saruthi were cool. They're asymmetrical beings who are like kind of fourth dimensional beings, and like the writer Dan Abnett describes these tiles that are being mined for them as like the human brain not really being able to understand their geometry, and then they have these like dimensions that they create with like geometry that doesn't make sense, and they also play with time travel as well, which is something that I thought was really cool because they're like messages and stuff that come in from the future that I actually wish they had touched. I wish they had done more with the time travel stuff. It was very light. It was done well because time travel is a sci-fi theme that has been so overdone, but I thought they could have done like maybe a little bit of more of a clever twist with it's not really time travel. It was more like messages and stuff being received from the future, and kind of out of order in the sequences of events when viewed from the perspective of the characters, because things inside these dimensions that the Saruthi created were like so kind of crazy that it warps not just space but time. Anyway, I thought it was interesting. I thought I could have done a little more with it, but I thought it was pretty cool still. And the Saruthi are again, we always think about aliens as looking like humans, but the Saruthi look nothing but like humans, and they're asymmetrical, which kind of ties into the fact that they're like not bound by the same kind of geometrical shapes as us humans are. Then their brains can interpret like a higher dimension, which I thought was kind of interesting. So it was a cool and unique Xenos race to choose for the book. Also, we had the Chaos Space Marines involved, specifically the Emperor's Children, who are really cool. If you know about the Warhammer 40k. Oh, that's something I forgot to explain about Warhammer 40k at the beginning, was that the main like Imperial faction is Space Marines, right? Who are like immortal 9 feet tall or 8 feet tall warriors with power armor and multiple hearts, genetically modified. Anyway, the Chaos ones, which are the evil ones that rebelled against the Emperor and the Horus Heresy, they have different factions, and the faction that is involved in this one is the Emperor's Children. Now, we don't see like a ton of Space Marines. They're so powerful they can take out so many people. So if there was like a whole regiment of Space Marines, there's no way Eisenhorn would have been successful. But it was cool. It was, Dan Abnett has a really good way of making characters like he did with Horus, or like he did with like the Chaos Space Marines, have like a lot of mystique to them, like a lot of like power, and like be very intimidating characters. And he makes these characters like exciting in that way. These like, the way he describes Space Marines as from the view of a normal human, how a human would see these monsters essentially that are really post-human. So that I thought it was cool, and I think the Emperor's Children are a cool faction of Chaos Space Marines. So that was just awesome. Oh, there's a team of characters that Eisenhorn has, which is a great team. That there are more books with those characters. Now, there's another series called Ravenor, which kind of ties into the Eisenhorn series, because there is, I guess, this Inquisitor Ravenor that appears in later Eisenhorn books. He wasn't in this one, but I think he's going to appear in either volume 2 or 3. But there's also a Beckwin novel, and let me talk about his kind of his crew here. So there's Benticor, which is basically his like pilot and sniper. He's like kind of his guy he relies on for when they're in combat. There's Amos, who's his savant, so he's just a genius and he can remember like anything, and he can, you know, find out whatever information that the Inquisitor needs. There's a character called Fishig. I'm not sure how to say it, but basically he is an Adeptus Arbites or Arbites. I don't know how to say that one either, but it just means he's like basically a cop in the you know, Imperium of Mankind in Warhammer 40k. But he has like, you know, this really intimidating armor, and he's, you know, a good fighter as well. So he becomes part of Eisenhorn's team. And then we have Bequin. Now I don't have this novel, but Bequin also has her own novel or series of novels. I'm not sure if it's more than one. But there is a Bequin novel that is a direct spinoff of this as well, which I definitely think I'll be interested in reading. And she, of course, is, what is it called? She's like a blank. It's basically, she has a gene that makes it so that psychers cannot affect her. And also she nulls out the powers of chaos and psychers when she's in their vicinity, which is a really cool thing, I think, to have. Like, basically these characters that can be used in a clever way to stop a really powerful psyker, which is why Eisenhorn recruits her to be on his team. So I think she's a very interesting character. She has some character development in this story, and I'm interested to read her novels, which come later. And then there's Tobias Maxilla, who is basically a merchant with like a big ship that Eisenhorn basically commandeers to take him around the different systems that he needs to go to in the galaxy in pursuit of the villains of this book. The Necrotouche is interchangeable with any powerful weapon in the universe, right? It's kind of a plot device. So I thought that was just like, it's whatever. It's the book that gives you all knowledge and power or whatever. It's like, it could have been anything, which is fine. It's a little cliche, but whatever. There also was this part where they get captured by the Glaws, and instead of the Glaws just unaliving them, they basically put them in a pit fight. And that's the part that I was talking about earlier in the review, where I was like, okay, why did every single book that I read, the villains don't take the opportunity to unalive you, and they put you in like a gladiator fight instead, and then you escape inevitably, of course, you know, right? It's cliche, but that didn't detract too much from the book for me. There's also an overarching plot with the recurring dream about the man with like no eyes or whatever, or the demon with no eyes, that does get furthered at the very end of this book, and I'm excited to see where that goes into the next book, which I think is Malleus, which I think is about demons, and I'm wondering if that's going to be a plot point that carries on throughout all three novels, which I like. I like when contained stories are good, but I like when there's a plot that is an overarching plot over a series of novels, you know, which is usually what it is, but you never know. Sometimes with Warhammer 40k, they're almost like one-shots, these novels, which is a comic term. But anyway, that's the spoilers I wanted to talk about. I thought it was a lot of cool stuff. It was a unique take on some Xenos. I thought the book was great. I highly recommend you read this if you're interested in the world of Warhammer 40k. This is a great starting point. Inquisitors are really, really cool. I love the setting. I love that it's grim and dark. I think it's just cool. And I think it's knowing that the setting is grim and dark going into it, you're prepared for that. So it's not jarring when these things kind of happen. And yeah, overall, I give it an 8 out of 10. I want to know what you thought about this book. If you're going to put spoilers in any comments that you leave, just put spoilers at the top so no one reads it if they don't want to see them. But please give me feedback on what you thought of the first Eisenhorn book. And, you know, you can even tell me like if the next two books you think those are going to be good as well. I'm going to start reading the next book in here soon. I have a bunch of other books that I'm reading, so look out for more book reviews coming to this channel. I have plans for, you know, posting to this channel more often than I have been. I think I only have one video up so far, but they're going to keep coming, and I'm going to try to get them on a regular basis. So stick with me on this channel. If you like my book reviews, I have other books that aren't in Warhammer 40k that I'm going to review, sci-fi and fantasy as well. So yeah. And I think I'm going to stick to this format where I do a non-spoiler review to the start and then a spoiler review at the end. Because sometimes when I'm looking for reviews of books, I can only find one or the other. And sometimes I want to see a spoiler review after I've read a book. And sometimes I want a non-spoiler review before I've read a book. So that's what I'm going to try to do with these books going forward, is just to have the kind of the best of both worlds in one video. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. Let me know what books you think I should read next. And please let me know what you thought of this review in the comments down below. Also, don't forget to subscribe. That really would help because this channel is small and any subscribers would really help. So please subscribe. You're going to get more content on this channel, a lot more.